How we doing? Welcome back to the shed, guys. I was just potting around in the shed, looking at my bike and tinkering with a few bits. I went out for a ride yesterday. I was thinking about my brakes and the difference on some of the tarmac, some of the different tarmac and stuff that I was coming across, and some of the work they were doing on the roads. And it led me to think about brake upgrades. And most bikers are wasting money on what they think is better braking systems. And I hear the same thing all the time, like new pads, bigger discs, braided lines. My bike stops way better now. But does it stop way better, or does it just feel better? Because those are not the same thing. And that's where people start talking absolute bollocks. Like, if you strip it back to what's actually going on when your bike, going on when you brake, your brakes don't stop the bike, your tyres stop the bike. All your braking system does is apply a force to the wheel, and that force gets transmitted to the tyre, and obviously the tyre has to grip the road, and that tiny contact patch, which is what, the size of your hand, if that's doing all the work. And for me, obviously working in engineering, I know everyone knows a lot of stuff about friction, and we can all talk about it, but like, the key bit is there's a maximum amount of force that contact patch can handle before it lets go. And that is set by the coefficient of friction between the tyre and the road, and then obviously multiplied by the load on the tyre. And once you exceed that, the tyre slides. And when it slides, friction drops, not increases, drops. So if you lock the wheel or even get close to that slip point without controlling it properly, you're not stopping faster, you're stopping worse. And that's just basic physics. And obviously that's where ABS comes in, and that's where people get confused, or not all people. Obviously I am talking to the minority, I'm sure, but ABS doesn't give you more grip. It doesn't magically make your brake stronger. All it does is stop you from crossing that limit into a full skid. So it rapidly releases and reapplies the brake pressure to keep the wheel rotating, right on the edge of slip where friction is at its highest. So, ABS, as we know, is basically a safety system that helps you stay near to the peak friction point, especially if you panic and grab the lever like an idiot. But here's the thing that people don't like hearing. Even with ABS, your stopping distance is still limited by tyre grip. ABS just helps you to stay close to that limit. It doesn't move the limit. So if your tyres can generate, say, 1G of deceleration on dry tarmac, then that's your ceiling. You can fit all the fancy brake parts you want. You're not braking harder than without sliding. So like most modern bikes, even fairly basic ones, already have brakes that can easily exceed the grip limit. You can prove it yourself. Go out and grab a handful of front brake, and obviously the wheel's either going to lock or your ABS will kick in. And that means your brakes are already capable of more force than the tyres can use. So upgrading your pads and saying it stops better, what you're usually feeling is initial bite. The brake fluid, the brake builds force quicker. The lever feels firmer. The response feels sharper. But that's feel. It's not necessarily a short stopping distance, and this is where people waste money. Because if you actually want to reduce your stopping distance, then the biggest upgrade you can make is tyres. And weirdly, some people, that's where they scrimp. They scrimp on tyres. But better tyres increase the coefficient of friction, and that increases the maximum braking force you can apply before the tyres start slipping. And that literally raises the ceiling of performance. Like, brake upgrades don't do that. Unless your current brakes are so fucking bad that they can't reach that limit, which on most modern bikes they absolutely can, to be fair. And to be fair, brake upgrades do have a place if you're riding hard, doing repeated heavy braking, track days, long downhill runs, obviously heat becomes a problem. Shit pads can fade, fluid can fucking boil, discs can overheat. In those situations, better components keep performance consistent. But most people riding on the road are nowhere near that, not even close. The bike will always outperform the rider on the road. So what ends up happening is people spend a load of money chasing a feeling instead of improving the thing that actually matters, which is fucking grip. And then they convince themselves it's faster because it feels sharper at the lever, but it's not. It's just not. And there's an uncomfortable truth, basically. Like a rider on good tyres with average brakes, who understands how to modulate their braking properly, will all day long outbrake someone with expensive brakes upgrades who just grabs a handful and fucking lets the ABS sort it out every time. Because braking isn't just about force, it's about control. So, ABS helps you not mess it up, basically. It's just a safety feature. Your brakes help you apply force, but your tyres decide everything. So before you throw money at your bike and throw money at fucking pads and, braided lines, just ask yourself, are you improving your performance or are you just paying for a better feeling? Something to think about anyway. There's my little rant I was thinking about yesterday while I was on a nice little ride out to Aberystwyth. Different tarmac, 10 mile an hour limits where they're cutting the road up. Yeah, have a think.